It is Captain T, pilot-to-pilot network. From the cockpit of the Screaming Eagle, we're on our way up north to visit a friend of mine named Roger Brown. Roger Brown has an ongoing love affair with big round engines. We're going to go up and see one of his fabulous reconstructions, an absolutely gorgeous classic airplane. Come on along and be my co-pilot. We are going to have a fabulous time.
Captain T from Pilot to Pilot Network here. We're here with my friend Roger Brown, all-around aviator. He's going to tell us a little bit about this Howard aircraft. It's such a beautiful piece of work. And so I'll hand it off to Roger. Roger, tell us a little bit about the history and what you know about Howards.
Okay, thanks, Tom. This is my Howard. It's actually my wife's Howard. We bought it as a project off eBay, if you can believe that, in 2010. My wife always wanted one. This one popped up as a project, and she said bid on it. So we bid on it, and long story, but next thing you know, we're the owners. So the next 3.5 years were devoted to finishing the restoration. The guy was well into it, but still an awful long way to go. I had just retired. My restoration capabilities amounted to my high school shop class abilities, and that was it. So we got into it, and I farmed out the tail group to a friend of mine and bead blasted and powder coated all the metal workings inside the elevators and ailerons, elevators and rudder and all that. And he did the recover and the paint work and all that on the tail group. I farmed the wings out, and the Howard wings are all wood spars, wood ribs, wood skin, and it's very complex, and you have to know what you're doing. And I was lucky enough to find a guy in Ocala, Florida, that did all that work for me. That was basically the only job in his shop for 1.5 years. So he rebuilt the wings. When I got the project, it was Sans engine. The guy had sent the engine out to an overhaul shop that went out of business. And when he went back to check on things, the engine was gone, his $10,000 deposit was gone, and I became the owner. He'd had it with the airplane. So when I got it, he'd done nothing with the wings, nothing with the tail group. The engine was gone. He had started rebuilding a whole new panel in there, which is trying to replicate a pre-war civilian Howard. He'd done a beautiful job of that. He'd collected period instruments that were not yet overhauled, but he had all the instruments collected to go in the panel. He had the fuselage all bead blasted, powder coated, wiring strung, the gear rebuilt, fabric on the fuselage, and that was about it. So all the sheet metal up around the cabin area, I basically tackled that and got that completed. All the paint work was done in my hangar down in Florida. And like I said, 3.5 years of steady pieces, parts, accessories, going out for overhaul, scrounging stuff, finding stuff. The landing lights alone, I have $5,000 wrapped up just in a pair of the Grimes retractable landing lights that are ST-250s period for the airplane. Hard to find. Got enough parts together to build up a couple. A guy in Massachusetts did that for me. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. My wife picked out all the interior fabrics. It's leather and an English wool. Trying to think what else. I mean, had all the instruments, all the faces redone here in Kalamazoo. it just goes on and on. We tried to replicate, stay on, the guy I bought the project from, he wanted to replicate a pre-war civilian Howard from a war surplus Howard, which is what this one is. It was an NH-1. It was an instrument trainer for the Navy. It spent its World War II years as a trainer in Naval Air Station Atlanta. After the war, it was sold as surplus and ended up in the hands of Curtis LeMay. General Curtis LeMay owned the airplane for a period of time in the 50s, and that was his personal aircraft when he was commander of SAC, Strategic Air Command, out in Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. So the airplane has quite a history. It was wrecked a couple times, and in the 80s and then again in the 90s. That's when Kelly got it. He spent a dozen years or more. Then I got it in 2010, got it flying in 2013. Since then, the airplane has been to Oshkosh, Sun and Fun, Blakesburg, big flying at Ocean Reef. It's been to Triple Tree. It's been to Broadhead. It's been to all the big fly-ins this neck of the woods. It's won some major awards, been on some magazine covers. The paint scheme is a Howard factory design or scheme. The color choice, there is a photograph floating around the Howard community of one that was purchased by the governor of the state of Michigan in 1941, and it was the state aircraft. And this photograph shows it sitting in front of the old brick terminal building at the Lansing airport. And it's a color photograph. The colors aren't great, but the colors are what we chose here. And the black, it's just Aerothane stock colors, Aerothane Dakota black, Daytona white, and Reno gold. And at Oshkosh, I had it at the show circle, and a guy kept walking around the airplane, and he came up to me and he said, "Is this your airplane?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yeah, well, it's my airplane, it's my Howard." And he says, "No, sir," he says, "this is a flying tuxedo." So we hit a home run with the color selection on the airplane. Everybody just thinks it's wonderful, and it is a dream to fly. Tommy and I were up earlier today in it. All the fuel, 150 gallons, is in the belly, and the airplane is 3,000 pounds empty. So you've got 150 gallons of fuel, 8 gallons of oil, the big engine, and you get it up, get everything trimmed out, and get your throttle settings and all that, and it just cruises through the air. There's no autopilot or anything, but you don't even really need it. It just is very stable, and it cruises along like an old Buick is what I describe it as. Okay, the engine is a Pratt & Whitney 985 cubic inches, 9-cylinder, 450 horsepower. It has an internal 10-to-1 blower, so it performs very well at high altitude. When I got the project, there was no engine with it. I found through a Stearman buddy of mine that had bought a Stearman restoration project that had a 985 on it, and he wanted to take it back to the original 220 horsepower. So I got the engine, had it overhauled at Yonkin Aviation in Fayetteville, Arkansas. They did a beautiful job, put the dress-up kit on it, the chrome pushrod covers and all that sort of thing. The prop is a Hamilton Standard 2D30, and the engine, the prop setup is on lots and lots of airplanes. Yeah, the Havilland Beaver, the Beech 18. The list goes on and on and on. They made about 60,000 of these engines. Parts are available. Several high-quality shops around the country still work on them. They're still in service. Bush planes, Beech 18s, crop dusters, different airplanes fly this engine. So great engine. Nice. Landing gear. The airplane is a big, heavy airplane, 4,800 pounds at gross weight, and you land in it at about 70 miles an hour. So it's a handful, and you don't have a lot of rudder. And the Howard had an Achilles heel, and that was the landing gear. And in here, in behind the gear leg fairing, is a big oleo strut, and then fore and after the oleo strut is a big coil spring about 13 inches long and a couple inches in diameter. And what the aircraft would do, if you landed a little bit hard, the strut would dampen that first landing, and you can see the wear strips here where it can compress. I think there's 8.5 inches of travel there. It would compress, but then the oleo was done. So now you're just on spring action. So the airplane, big heavy airplane, moving pretty fast, down the runway, gets hopping, gets galloping, gets oscillating. That was the Howard hop, that was the Achilles heel. If you're flying it on the standard landing gear, the first thing you want to do is to always be ready to go around. You have 450 horsepower, and if it gets going on you, you don't want to try to save a bad landing. Just give it the horsepower and go around. So that's what I did for the first 3 or 4 years I owned it. And then we finally put this modification on the landing gear where it deadens that. It really does a superb job. It's basically the same gear. He just hard chromes all the wear surfaces, machines everything to much closer tolerances, so it works the way it's supposed to, or was designed to. New metering pins and all that, and it is, as advertised, does a wonderful job.
Okay, we are on front tank, fuel's on, everything's good.
What a treat. Mr. Howard.
The big old beast.
Yeah, what's it weigh?
It was 3,002 pounds empty. And gross weight is like 4,800 or something. Has 151 gallons of fuel, 8 gallons of oil.